Welcome to Not Factory Approved, the site where I attempt to show you many different ongoing projects. Some are worth doing, some are not. Some are successes, and some are not. Hopefully I can share with you experience that I've gained over the years. Hopefully it, if nothing else, teaches you when to quit. And otherwise, sometimes you might just see a project that comes from the ashes of despair and rises like a phoenix to be something useful once again. So hopefully you find this site helpful and enjoyable, and stay tuned. Thank you. Here we have a trusty F150 2013. It's got 216,000 kilometers on it now, which is just over 120,000 miles. And it has three problems that I seem to have trouble fixing. One is a recurrent valve cover leak. So I'll take it off yet again, replace the gasket yet again. This time though I will check for any warp and try and make sure I can find any spot where it might be leaking. It's always in the back left corner. Very annoying. Fine on the highway, but in town, especially if you're going stop and go, you get to sniff oil fumes. So the oil drips down onto the manifold. There are lots of good videos around about taking these apart, replacing valve cover, timing chains, all that kind of stuff. I'll just quickly go through it because there's lots of resources out there, people who can demonstrate much better than I can. So to start with, it's the tubing for the turbo, and this is intake tubing, 5/16 or 8 millimeter nuts on the clamps, and they're usually very tight, somewhat difficult to get off, but they do come off. Then comes the valve cover. Take off the oil filler cap, lift it, pull it out, set it aside. Always put the filler cap back on because you never know what might fall down in there, no matter how careful you are. Then it's a case of tubing, turbo lines, electrical. Then it's a case of turbo lines, tubing, spark plug coils, electrical connections off the CPU. Always remove the battery connection and leave it tucked down to the side to make sure nothing goes live. Especially since you're disconnecting the CPU, you don't want any kind of glitches or sparks. But these are the things that have to be disconnected, all the various tubing. This is the turbo boost solenoid. That has to come off, the lines have to come off. They go down to the turbos. These lines for positive crankcase ventilation. With a turbo it's a little more complicated than normally aspirated. And that's about it. I'll show you once the valve cover is off. One repair that I did, it's $140 to replace this boost tube here, because the positive crankcase ventilation engine fumes go in to that port. It broke, so I used a standard plumbing fitting of plastic, a brass fitting of 3/8 I believe, tapped it out into the plastic, spun it in, tapped out the fitting, spun that in, and before I did that I made sure that I could get this tubing. It's easier with some heat to get it onto the fitting itself, and then it can just spin. It seals, doesn't leak, and you can spin it out of the way. Although for this particular job I don't need to do that because I'll not be taking that side off. Just wanted to show you a past repair. The chronic leak on this engine, for me at least, has always been in the back left corner. They call this the right valve cover because it's on the left side as you face the engine. If you're new to engines. That's what most manufacturers do. I'm not sure if everybody does that anymore. It used to be that it depended on who made the engine, which side they called it. But that's the case for Ford. And so we will work on the right-hand valve cover. Another thing that I've done in the past is these spark plug or coil pack connectors are very weak and they tend to break off before they will release. So I found that if you have the right width of tie wrap, which is about 1/4 inch, then you can latch it in there and they won't come out. I have tried to get those tabs from Ford, and you have to replace the whole connector, which is about 40 bucks a piece. You can see I have 3 on this side that are broken, and I have another 1 or 2 on the left-hand side that are broken. One thing to make sure of is that the spark plug boots on the coil packs actually seal properly. If they don't seal properly, or they don't have silicone grease inside still, then you can get misfires. And it will create, if it continues too long, it will create a track on the plug, spark plug, and you will have a great problem getting rid of it, or you have to buy a new plug. Another thing, if you have compressed air, once you have the coil packs out, use compressed air and blow out the spark plug holes. As well as the valve cover around the spark plug holes to stop debris getting in. Not taking out the spark plugs now, but it helps to keep the dirt down in the future. If you do have to take it apart and you don't have compressed air, it won't be such a problem. Now everything is loose on the valve cover. You'll need a couple of 8mm sockets, or one 8mm socket for a couple of 8mm nuts that hold the turbo boost line on. To get that out of the way, I've used a bungee cord to pull it, the intake and the air conditioning line away from the valve cover, so I have some room to pull it up. The rest are 10mm that hold the actual valve cover on, and you will require a deep socket for them. Once you start removing, don't stop. Like, don't remove one completely and then start on another one. Just break them free. That helps to reduce any stress on the valve cover that might warp it, especially if the engine is hot. So in this case, I started at the far corners, cracked those loose, then did the center ones, cracked those loose, then I worked on the middle and broke those loose, and then I spun them all out by hand after that. One tool that I've found for removing a stuck valve cover on this particular engine, it's the best one I've got so far, is an old brake adjuster tool. This is for when cars had drum brakes, and I work on old cars occasionally, so this is what I use. I tuck it down into the corner here and work along and try and pry it up, break it free, not putting too much stress on any one area. And you have to watch another thing with these engines is that the valve cover or the spark plug seals that are in here will sometimes stick to the spark plug tube. So you have to be careful. I did remove it. The first time I removed it, I actually bent it too much, which makes me wonder if I warped it at that time, because those seals stick, and it was incredibly difficult to get it off. Another thing to watch for, I didn't show before, is to remove the PCV intake inlet there. Looks like this. Fits in there. I like to put the screws back in as many of the original holes as possible, or bolts, and that way I don't have to spend as much time sorting out what goes where, putting too long or too short a bolt in. The thing I noticed with the bore scope was that in the back corner there was some debris where the valve cover sat. So I'm hoping that was what was causing it. Otherwise, I'll be cleaning all of the old silicone off. It's a special silicone from Ford. I believe there's another one that works pretty well. I'm sticking with the Ford one for now. And you have to leave it sit for 24 hours once you put it in place and tighten down the valve cover. One thing I just noticed that might be the problem is that there's a locator tab on this far bolt hole right there. And on the other one it was squashed, which indicates that I didn't put it in properly. Like I said, not factory approved. And then there's a locator key there as well. That one I knew about. This one I did not notice. I was rushing, I guess. Or just incompetent. Hope you don't have the same problem. And now to clean off the surface of the block for the valve cover. Another thing to make sure of is that there are 2 points where you need silicone. That's where I'm going to use the Ford silicone. And those have to be cleaned. It's the join between the front timing cover and the block. Likewise in the back corner of the camshaft, on the far left hand side, you have to make sure that all debris is out of that corner. It's hard to see and it's hard to clean, so be careful. So for this I need a 1/4 inch-pound torque wrench. I believe it's 87 inch-pounds, I'll clarify that. And I go around and I start and do the opposite order to what I removed them. So starting in the middle, doing a cross pattern of a square, and then spreading out from there and working out to the ends. And then going over it all again, usually around in a sequence just to make sure I haven't missed anything.